shortly after my diagnosis, my doctor told me that I would never work again. He told me that I needed to get used to being on disability because I was never going to be able to work or function like a quote-unquote normal person ever again.
Access denied. Access denied. Access denied.
Hey y'all, it's your host Jessica Jordan, and I'm here on Access Denied, the podcast dedicated to helping you get over your fear of rejection, one episode at a time. Let's go! Hey y'all, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Access Denied. I am so freaking excited to introduce you to today's guest. He's a content creator, an author, and a mental health advocate, and his name is Kody Green. Kody is the best. He and I have been friends for quite a while now, and I just have such a great time every time that I get to hang out with him, including in today's episode where we talk about everything from mental health to toxic work environments. This is a can't miss episode, friends. Stay tuned. Kody, welcome to Access Denied. How are you doing today?
I am doing so great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this.
No, thank you for coming on. I am so excited to have you. I've known you now for a little over a year, and I feel like in that year we've had the pleasure of running into each other like 4 or 5 different times.
Yeah, a lot actually. It's like every time I go to an event in the Midwest or even in DC, I feel like you're always there.
Same. And every time I'm like shocked to see you, but I don't know why at this point. I'm just like, oh my God, you're wearing your YouTube hat. And that was actually where we first met, was through a YouTube creator collective event, I believe.
Yeah, I think in Chicago.
Yes, because I know you've traveled, because you don't live in Chicago. You've traveled for those. I do not. I stay in Chicago.
Now, they weirdly enough don't have any in the middle of Wisconsin, so I have to I have to go to the cities when I want to go to those events.
How strange. Why would they not do that?
They didn't want to have a collective creator event for just me in the middle of Wisconsin, apparently.
You know what? I love Wisconsin. It's the home of cheese and Wisconsin Dells, and I don't know, my friends live up there. Beer is really popular. Let's go to Wisconsin. Let's do it. Let YouTube make it happen.
I keep saying it, but they're not listening. So hopefully if you say it, they'll actually do it.
Nobody listens to me, so I have no hope in hell. Sorry. But it's so good to have you on here. Thank you so much. And can you introduce yourself to everybody listening?
Yeah, so my name's Kody Green. I am a schizophrenia and mental health advocate. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 21 years old. I was also a caregiver for my mother with schizoaffective disorder. So mental illness and schizophrenia have been a part of most of my life. And I started making content in 2018 just to help people better understand my diagnosis and what it is I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I faced, a lot of support, but also a lot of stigma. So I just kept making content. And as of about 2 weeks ago, I hit 2 million followers across all platforms, and I just had a book come out in January, so all great things, but, it's a lot of hard work. It can be really frustrating work at times, and I know this is something you can relate to, and so I definitely love the work I do, but it's challenging at times.
Yeah, being an advocate in any space, I feel like, is challenging, but mental health awareness, I can imagine like it being such an invisible disability in so many ways. Like there's so much pushback online. I see it on your page, on other friends of mine's pages, and I hate to see it, especially in 2025, but the work you're doing is so important, and I've learned a lot from your page, that's for sure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. And also, I've been listening to your book. I am 2 chapters from the end. I tried really hard to finish it before this recording. But there's only so fast you can put it. I had it on 2 times speed. I'm like, soak it in. But there's only so fast you can listen and still understand it.
That's already faster than I'd be able to listen to it and register what's being said.
I had to really lock in, I was sat on my couch like, all right, this is what we're doing for the next 30 minutes. But it's so good. And I really wanted to have you on here to talk through a lot of different things with mental health, but especially workplace. I know that's kind of where your focus is with your book and with your speaking work. And as somebody who's not had a corporate job pretty much my entire adulthood. It is something that I know is very difficult for disabled people and people with mental health diagnoses to manage because of the ableism that is present. So I guess, like, where can you share with the audience, like, where your journey started? What got you involved in the advocacy space?
So, I was raised by a mother with schizoaffective disorder, and we grew up in a very small rural community. So, like, people didn't talk about mental health, people didn't talk about mental illness. She was a single mom, so when her symptoms started, like, it was just us. And so at like 12, 13 years old, I became a full-time caregiver for her. She wasn't able to work anymore, and so all of this was happening, and we had no one to turn to, no one we could go to with questions, and we didn't really understand what was happening with her. So it was really frustrating, and we wanted to try to, help, but we didn't know how. And she didn't get a diagnosis until I was, in high school and about ready to go to college. And so up until that point in my life, I was a full-time caregiver for her. I was still going to school. I was working to try to help pay some bills and bring an income to the house. And I was pretty, like, quote unquote normal. I always thought I was a neurotypical kid. I never really struggled that much with mental health. I had to, like, really buckle down and be the adult of the family. But then in my first year of college, I moved out. I went to college about an hour away from home. And I wanted to be close enough where I could still come help my brother and sister if they needed help taking care of my mom. But in my first year of college, I went through a psychotic break, and I started having auditory and visual hallucinations, delusions, paranoid thoughts, and I ended up losing my job, dropped out of college, and I had to basically figure out how to live my life now with this new disorder. And the problem was, even though I knew what schizophrenia looked like because of my mom, when my disorder started, I couldn't understand that that's what was happening because of the level of delusion that comes with schizophrenia. So instead of getting the help I needed, I ended up falling into active addiction. I ended up in jail, and so I didn't get to the point where I was able to accept help or ask for help. And it wasn't until I got out of jail that I got my diagnosis, I got treatment and medication, and I was able to start rebuilding my life. And the story behind the book was actually shortly after my diagnosis, my doctor, who wasn't like my primary care doctor, it was just a doctor I was seeing at the time, told me that I would never work again because of my schizophrenia. And so it wasn't a question, like, it was a statement. He told me that I needed to get used to being on disability because I was never going to be able to work or function like a quote unquote normal person ever again. And when it's your doctor, you believe it, you're like, oh, okay, so that's something I'm not ever going to be able to do. And growing up in the Midwest, I was very proud of, like, my work ethic and everything like that. So it was hard to hear. But then I found peer support, and I found a local in-person group. I went there and I started meeting people with my diagnosis who not only had jobs, but they had healthy relationships in their lives. They were, like, pretty functional day to day. They had all this, resources and all this treatment and coping mechanisms. And so I started going to peer support more. I started having more confidence that I could do these things. And eventually I did get back to work. And so I after 10 years of this diagnosis now, I've worked in many different industries and many different roles. And I was able to write this book about mental health and mental illness in the workplace. And I wrote a signed copy and brought it to that doctor. And so that was a pretty rewarding feeling. And that's, largely how I got started with advocacy. And then right after I found peer support is when I got onto TikTok and started making videos, and my page blew up. So I just started doing that as a way to try to help educate people about schizophrenia and mental illness and addiction recovery and whatever else it was that I could use my lived experience to help people understand.
That is such a powerful story. I love a prove them wrong sort of mentality myself.
Favorite stories.
My favorite as well. And doctors just be saying the darndest things sometimes. And it's so frustrating because I know myself, like, growing up with so many doctors around, like, you believe them and you trust them as authority figures, and it's really scary when they say things like that and they don't have any basis, or, like, it's just, like, incorrect, right? Like, Yeah.
Well, and it's just so absolute. Like he didn't question it. It was a statement. That's what really like I remember was it wasn't like, "Oh, you might not be able to work." He said, "You will not be able to work or hold a full-time job." And I was like, that's a crazy thing to say to someone, especially when, when you have an illness like schizophrenia or I always say like any sort of disability, doctors should be trying to give you hope, not not make it harder for you to imagine yourself doing things that, yes, will be difficult. 90% of people with my diagnosis don't work. So, like, I think that's where he was kind of coming from, especially because when I first met him, I was basically nonverbal. I couldn't communicate properly. And so, like, from his point of view, maybe statistically, that made sense. But I think doctors often look at us like statistics and not like individual people. And that's where I think they really mess up because now it's like, yes, I do live a very full functional life. Most people who meet me would not even know that I have schizophrenia unless I'm having an active episode. So it's just frustrating to know that, like, if that was said to me, it's probably being said to other people living with schizophrenia, not just schizophrenia, other mental illnesses, other disabilities. And so we're kind of cutting people short before they get the chance to even try these things. It might get to a point where, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been able to work if my medication hadn't got to the point where I'm as stable as I am now. But to not even question it was crazy to me.
Sometimes I think doctors forget that they're healers, and that doesn't just mean healing the body. It means healing like all aspects of the human experience in so many ways. And I understand, and this is not me making excuses for doctors or medical professionals. It's just like they deal with a lot on a day-to-day basis. They deal with a lot of like heavy mental stuff themselves, and I can understand why it's easier to just be like a blanket statement, like, okay, you fit into these numbers. This is the probability of that happening, and kind of trying to give you a realistic, like, quote unquote perspective. But the problem with that is it doesn't allow room for growth. It doesn't allow room for true healing of the mind, body, and spirit. And I know like that's something that you talked about in the book is like, it's a holistic thing. And I know people get weird about the word holistic medicine and all that, but like there are benefits to like dealing with the whole person. And I think sometimes Western medicine forgets that.
Well, and especially when it comes to mental health and mental illness, because I am very much a believer of medication and treatment and all of that. But we also have to remember that mental well-being is a huge thing that people, even without mental illness, struggle with. Like you can be a very neurotypical person and still struggle with your mental health. And that's why early on in the book I wrote that too. I wanted to make sure people understood the difference between mental health and mental illness. Because a lot of the time now in mainstream media, we act like they're the same thing, and they're not, because everyone experiences mental health. Everyone can have good and bad experiences with mental health. Mental illness is a diagnosis. That's either schizophrenia, PTSD, DID. Like that is an actual diagnosis, whereas mental health kind of gets lumped in now with mental illness and vice versa. So it's like I try to really create a distinction between those two because like everyone should focus on their mental health, prevent burnout, make sure that they're taking care of themselves, make sure that they're taking care of their mental well-being. And I think that we're putting that in a conversation where it sounds like only people with severe mental illness need to worry about those things. And like you just said, even with doctors, I'm like, doctors are kind of doing the same thing. They're not talking about mental illness separately from mental health. And it's creating this idea that, like, oh, you only need to worry about self-care and coping mechanisms and things like that if you struggle with severe mental illness. And I'm like, no, everyone needs to do that. Everyone should be worrying about that and thinking about that and focusing on that. So that's a thing that I tried to mention in the book and talk about, more so in terms of the workplace, but definitely just in everyday life as well.
No, I love that distinction so much because like I have anxiety, right? Like it is mental health based. It's not like a full on like I had a therapist tell me that, but it's different. It just is. But it affects my day-to-day life. It affects my relationships with people. It affects my ability to work on a regular basis. And so I think it's an important distinction, and making sure there's space for both and also like proper space for both because they're different is super important. And I guess like talking about the book too, another topic that you mentioned in there that I would love to discuss with you on the podcast, especially around workplace culture, right? Because I feel like a lot of people in the disability community question whether or not they should disclose their disabilities, their mental illness, their mental health issues, anything, personal issues in general. And I think you cover it so brilliantly in the book, and I'd just love for you to discuss your take on it.
It's really challenging because I would love to be able to have like a how-to guide, exact breakdown of how to approach a workplace, how to talk about your illness. The problem is, depending on the workplace and how toxic their work environment is and the people that are there, it can really differ from place to place and from industry to industry. I was really shocked. One of my first jobs after I got out of jail and got sober and got my diagnosis was, the only jobs that people with felonies can get. That's production, manufacturing, jobs like that. And those are very male-dominated industries. And it's really a toxic culture to see like men who are basically telling themselves that they're only worth what they produce. Like it's also a Midwest guy thing where it's like your only value is what you're able to contribute. And that's so detrimental to the human experience because there are times where even the most hardworking guys and girls can't work and can't do, and like we push ourselves to burnout, we push ourselves beyond what we're capable of, and then we feel worthless for not being able to keep up with the standards that we should. And so I always say that like you really have to kind of interview your workplace too. So like I do talk about in the books some questions that you can ask a new workplace or a place that you're interviewing at to see if they're pro mental health or pro disability resources. And unfortunately, it would be amazing to just go to any job and be like, oh, they're going to do a great job with my accessibility and making sure I have reasonable accommodations. And that's just unfortunately not the case. And some industries are able to do better than others with accommodations because they have less output needed, right? So the tough thing about like roles like production, manufacturing, stuff like that is output is 100% of what it is. So if you are not producing, you are not seen worthwhile. And that can be so, like I said, detrimental to your health, your mental well-being. It can cause burnout really quickly. But then the other people you work with will get into a very toxic mindset of like, we don't like this person because they couldn't perform one day, or they unfortunately live with an illness that makes them less reliable. And so some of the things I would hear people say, not just about people with mental illness, but about people with disabilities, about people with, abilities that made them less able to perform, were just horrible. And I didn't talk about this in the book. I worked for many years with a gentleman who, I forget the name of the condition, but essentially it caused him to have his arm at his side. So he could use his hand, but he couldn't move his arm from his side. And that was the first time I really experienced like some of the hatred for disability in production, manufacturing, and distribution roles. Because even though like he did a great job, he got his numbers, he did fine, but just by the visual appearance of him not being able to fully extend an arm or whatever, people would they would say the rudest, most insane things. And they would say it so comfortably too. And like I said, he had fine numbers, he did a good job, but a lot of it comes down to workplace toxicity. What does that workplace culture already look like when you come in? Because if it's really bad, you're not going to be able to change people's minds. And I experienced that a lot as someone who was very open about his illness. And the very last place I worked, I was able to actually be in a place where not only did my manager know and my my human resource manager, but like my coworkers knew about my diagnosis and what to do if I had symptoms. So, and they were very supportive and very incredible, but that took years of like trial and error, figuring out how to communicate these issues, figuring out when to talk about it with employers. figuring out when to talk about it with my coworkers. And it's so frustrating that we as people with disabilities have to be the ones to figure that out because workplaces aren't doing what they need to accommodate us.
So much of what you just said, I love. I love that you highlighted because it is a Midwestern thing, right? To like place value in what you do above anything else. And there was a trend going around on social media recently. I don't know if you saw it, was like, I kind of forgot this was the whole point, where people like show more like other aspects of their life beyond their career stuff. And I love like that is the whole point. And getting out of that mindset first and foremost is so hard to do. I want to just give space for the fact that it's difficult in a society that is based in capitalism and based in all of these things that are driven by money and work and all of that. But keeping that humanity will help in navigating workplaces and where you actually want to be working if you have that privilege. I understand that not everybody has as much opportunity and has as many options, because option in of itself is such a privilege. But if you have the opportunity to find a space that is less toxic, so much of it is exactly what you said. It is a vibe check. It is seeing what is going on in the interview process, in the like space, the people that you meet, and kind of just sussing it out as you go. And that's like, there's no one size fits all answer. I totally appreciate that you said that it'd be so great if everybody was empathetic and understanding and kind in this world, but that's just not, as we're seeing day to day, is not the world we live in.
And it's even more frustrating because you're like, okay, I get that, I get that the people you work with aren't always going to be understanding and empathetic, but even if it was like, hey, everyone in HR and management is at least, understanding and empathetic, and we don't even get that. So you walk into places and sometimes you're like, leadership will care. They'll understand. They'll try to help me. And sometimes that's not even the case in leadership. So that's where I get really frustrated, is because that would make it so much easier, like I said, to have a how-to guide for everyone who's trying to get into the workplace with either a mental illness or a disability. I would be a millionaire. I could just write a book on how to do it, but I can't because there's no exact replica from workplace to workplace, from culture to culture. And so there's a lot that I think people can do now to kind of like basically interview your workplace to make sure that they're going to be a good fit for you.
100%. And if you have that privilege, you should do that. If you have that opportunity, you should do that. I'm going to give you some tea, if you will. I'm drinking some right now.
Coffee, but I'll settle for tea.
Well, this is a first. I've not said this anywhere yet, but I actually just got hired on to my first like adult job.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's something that I've been actually working towards, I feel like, for a while, and I've had the privilege, as I've been speaking on it, through being a content creator and being like primarily like that's my full-time job, to not have to settle and to really get to interview places that I've been applying for, and also kind of having a lax attitude towards applying, which was nice. Wasn't stressful in as many ways as I know other people are stressed about it often when in a job search setting. But point being, I've just recently done all of this, and so it's very fresh in my mind.
Very relevant to you right now.
Very relevant. Have been going through it. But it's been so great. The place that I'll be starting working here soon. By the time this episode comes out, I'll probably have already started. But
nice.
Yes, very exciting. But as of right now, I'm not in office yet. But it's a hybrid situation. I feel like they've been very understanding with the few things that I've brought to them as being like, okay, so here's the realities of the situation. And so that gives me hope, and obviously I'll report back. But I am very encouraged by it for sure.
That's great. Yeah.
It's hard to find. Trust me. And
be.
I know you know too.
Well, and it, like I had talked about earlier too, depends on where you live. Like you live in New York City, you have a million different options on where to go to work and what industry to work in. When you live in rural Wisconsin, it's like, well, do you want to work at the grocery store or the creamery? Because you don't have a lot of options, So, and I think you pointed out there too. It's great if you have the ability to do that, and not everyone does, And so if that's the case, then you got to figure out coping mechanisms. You got to figure out how you can protect yourself and try to prevent burnout. But it's like, if you're in a place or a situation where you can really vet your employers, you got to utilize that because not everyone can.
100%. And I don't know if what I'm about to say is like maybe even incorrect of me to say, but like I also think that there's something to be said like if you can and you're in a space that doesn't have a lot of option and the options that you do have are not satisfactory to you, you can leave if you want to. Like I feel like some people need that permission almost to be like it's okay to take yourself out of toxic environments. You can go to a New York or a Chicago or wherever that even a Madison, I'm thinking Wisconsin, a Madison or Milwaukee, right? Like they're bigger spaces, they might have more options. Yes, they'll be more expensive, but like just know your options, know that you have options, and know that like there are people in this world that will support you in that, even if you're not surrounded by them right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think for some people, it's just, especially in small rural areas, I've known that a lot of people who live here, like their parents lived here, their grandparents lived here. It's hard for them to separate, and I've literally had to have that conversation with friends in my hometown where I grew up. I'm like, you don't have to stay here. Like, you can leave. Honestly, you should leave. Like, it's like one of those things where, people have lived in the same area their whole life, and people who haven't moved around a lot forget that that's even an option. So, yeah, definitely take that piece of advice as well.
I'm from a small town in the middle of Illinois, so I get it. A lot of people don't leave, or if they do leave, they go to college and then come back, or whatever that may be. That's great. That's wonderful if that works for them, and if that's what is what they want. But it's okay to want something different or to need something different. I think like a lot of this is need based too.
Well, and so I think that's important too is, if you need to be somewhere else where there are more jobs or more accessibility options or more resources, like that's the thing that I hated about my town when, my mom went through her diagnosis. There was nothing. There was no people there that had the same diagnosis. There was no resources. There was literally nothing. No accessibility, no one that could help or even really cared. Moving to a bigger area, I was like, oh, like there's nonprofits here that like are specifically for this, or there's like resources, there's in-person peer support groups. Like you move to a bigger area and you have all these things, and I think that's why like a lot of people who move to bigger areas tend to be people who just can't survive comfortably in small towns. Like with all the needs I have with my schizophrenia, my medication, everything like that, a small town wasn't reasonable for me to live in. And I'm sure it's the same for someone with, a disability. Like small towns don't think about those things. They don't think about how to be accommodating or accessible. So when you move to a city, you're like, I'm sure it's still a problem, but I'm like, at least some places are going to be more aware of that because they have more people there. They probably are faced with those things more than a small rural community. So they actually know how to adapt and like how to be prepared for people who aren't the same as the 25 people in your local, in your local grocery store. So I think that's a big thing too, is being in a place where you can get access to the things you need is just like, it's way more reasonable than people think.
100%. I mean, I think back to a couple years ago before I knew you even, like I had just moved back to the US. I was living in my hometown with my family because of circumstances or whatever. And it's a small town. It's like 10,000 people big. And you pretty much need a car to get around. That was a big reason why I moved to Chicago, because it has public transit, it has Ubers, it has like opportunities for me to get into a vehicle or get around to the grocery store or the gym or wherever I'm going for the day, see friends, without having to buy a $60,000 accessible vehicle. And I don't have money for right now.
I faced a similar issue when I was first diagnosed. I wasn't able to drive just because of the risk, the safety risk of if I had hallucinations or symptoms while driving. So for, I would say 3 to 4 years, I didn't drive. and I didn't leave rural Wisconsin either. So it was like getting transportation meant that I had to like either call a buddy or I had to find like some sort of public transit that really doesn't exist in my area. If I got to the city near me that was a little bit bigger, they at least had a city bus, you know? So it was like there was a time where I used to had to bike to work, and it was in the next small town, and that was 7 miles. So I would have to bike 7 miles to get to work. So it's like it's crazy to me that like we put ourselves in situations that it would have been way easier for me to leave my hometown, come to a bigger area, have public transport, have all these resources. Like, and I live in a bigger area now. The town I grew up in was like 1,900 people. So, so like we're talking like not even a stoplight in the town, like very, very small, one small grocery store, tiny little town. And yeah, they, for like a good portion of my life, they didn't even have a cab. They do now, but they didn't. And I was like, how are people supposed to get around? How are people supposed to do things if they don't have a car? And so it's so frustrating because I know that there are people in much worse condition than me with either their mental health or a physical disability who are still living in areas like that. And it can't be easy to try to survive in an area where it's literally not made for you.
No, and I obviously, as we've said multiple times, like obviously this is not going to be an option for everybody listening,
No, of
potentially. But I think it's just always good to consider that it is an option if you can, because I think it's important. But I have another topic I want to discuss with you. But before I switch completely the reins here, I would like you to pitch your book to the audience, like tell people where they can find it and all of that.
Yeah. So so mine's over me. I happen to have a copy right here. So
Of
mine's
course, I
over
love.
me. It is about mental health and mental illness in the workplace. And as you know, I also wanted your opinion, but I really try to make it for anyone who is experiencing anything that would make it harder for them to work. I wanted it to be for people with disabilities. I wanted it to be for people with mental health issues, mental illness. And the idea was just to try to make workplaces more accommodating for everyone, because I've been there where I'm put in a position where I'm trying my absolute hardest and it's not good enough because I didn't have resources, I didn't have medication or treatment, I didn't have reasonable accommodations. And so I really wanted to try to make people a resource guide to how they can, take care of themselves, how they can ask for these resources, how they can ask for reasonable accommodations. And you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or my website, which is kodygreen.com. And it's been an amazing project. It took a lot out of me to write because I had to relive a lot of really crappy work scenarios, and I had to relive a lot of like the early recovery stages. But I'm hoping that it's a good resource for anyone who needs a little insight to how I managed, all these different workplaces and all these different industries.
I am so proud of the book you've written. I think you have done a great job of being all encompassing, like obviously using your lived experience with mental illness as like the focal point in many ways, but letting it be able to be relatable to all different types of disabilities and people that are going through different things too. Like I think it lends itself to, I kind of mentioned it earlier, people that are going through maybe personal issues in their life as well, like death in the family, divorce, like different things. I think it's so important. Again, it brings the humanity back into the workplace, and it's something that I'm excited to have now as an audiobook. Like I bought it, it's on my phone. I'm excited because now that I'm going into a corporate setting, I think it's going to be a nice like reminder tool for myself even too. So
Yeah.
You should be very proud of it. It's really great.
Thank you so much.
And that makes me think back to, again, when we first met, one of the things that drew me to you in this room full of like other creators, right, was your humor and how funny you were. And I want to talk more about that because like obviously the book and the workplace stuff, like that's the meat and potatoes of advocacy in a lot of ways. But like, I think humor is such an important educational tool, and you use it in such a brilliant way. And I just like, you do stand up, you make videos online. You kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but how did you get started like making videos online? Where did that like shift happen for you?
So when I, started attending peer support, I found that like there were other people like me, and up until that point, I felt very alone. I felt like no one could understand what I had been through, and so when I found out there were other people that were like living with my illness and living like full, functional, happy lives, I really would like couldn't believe it. And so when I got to that point, I wanted to help people realize that they weren't alone. I wanted to be that person for someone else. And so, I was finally getting stable on medication, and I was doing a lot better in my personal life. I was working again. And then in about 2018, TikTok blew up. So I decided I was going to get on there and just share some stories about my life. And it took off way quicker than I ever could have imagined. I did my very first video about my schizophrenia diagnosis. It's a segment I still do today. It's called Schizophrenic Story Time. And I told a story about when I was in college, and I was still like undiagnosed, and I had this experience where I had hallucinations at my college, and it wasn't handled well, and I felt really embarrassed. And I shared that story, and I posted it, and I went to sleep with 300 followers, and I woke up to 10,000 followers. So like overnight, my TikTok just kind of took off and blew up. And as I continued making content, I still did all these story times and everything, but I started tying in like humorous videos to my lived experience, and I started using trends to talk about some of the things I deal with schizophrenia. Some people were not super happy with that, but also what I realized was I started reaching people who they didn't have schizophrenia. They weren't someone who knew anyone with schizophrenia. I was starting to reach people who didn't know anything about schizophrenia and had never been a part of the conversation and had never had much awareness around it besides what they've seen in movies or TV shows. So with humor and with comedy, I was reaching people who otherwise would never have been a part of the conversation about schizophrenia or mental illness. So I kept doing it for years and years, and then a few years ago, I decided to do stand up, and once again, I got a lot of backlash from my base community. But what people don't understand is not only am I reaching an audience that I wasn't reaching before, humor and comedy is my way of coping. I don't know if that's the millennial in me or if that's just me individually, but I've always dealt with the worst things I've ever been through with humor. And that's how I get through a lot of, reliving my story, because my story, I tell it all the time. That's my full-time job. I am a content creator, I'm a motivational speaker, and I sit around telling people about the most traumatic experiences in my life. And that can really weigh on you. That can be a lot. Tying in humor allows me to do that in more of a healing way, where I get to tell these stories and I get to free myself from them a little bit. I get to find a way where I can, put a spin on them where, yes, these things were really unfortunate, but there is some things that have been really funny in my lived experience, and a lot of things that have been funny in my day-to-day life, especially now in recovery and rebuilding my life. So I try to utilize that comedy to reach more people and to kind of deal with what I'd been through my whole lived experience.
Humor is such a powerful coping mechanism, and I love that you brought that up near the end there, because it's something that I've used throughout my life, without like even knowing it was like coping, right? It was just like, oh, this is my default, is to laugh at myself and whatever the situation, because if I don't laugh, I'll cry.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And my therapist rolls with it now too, and that's been fun. Our therapy sessions are a hoot and a half.
You had said this too, like, that's why I was like instantly like, oh, this is someone I'm going to be able to be friends with, because when I first met you, I was like, oh yeah, she gets it. Like, she'll understand why I do this. And you made a joke right away about, oh, there was at one of the events, there was like a like slime thing, and you were wearing your prosthetic, and you made a joke about like how much you were like, you're like, I would go in there, but this thing costs however much, and I don't think that's worth the slime that's going to be dumped on me. And I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And so like you just said, like immediately I was like, okay. And then Natasha was there too, And so I think between the three of us, we were like, okay, not only did we find, disabled content creators that we can be friends with, but we all really liked the humor involved with it. And that was like instant connection there.
100%. That us three, I feel like we're just having such a hoot and a half together that day, and like I love that that transferred all the way like to DC when we were just there earlier. That was just this month, wasn't it? God,
It
this
was,
month has
which
been
is why we're
insane.
both exhausted still and drinking coffee in this video.
Cheers, friend. That is true. That is very true. We have both said before we started recording how tired we were, and that we're not caffeine drinkers this late in the day, but alas, here we are. But one thing, like, I just love too that, like, I knew you got it early on. Like you said, you knew I got it. I knew you got it early on. And I saw that again when we were in DC. I was having a little mental health moment.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Fun fact for everybody, I was overwhelmed in a social situation. Pretty standard for me, but don't show that much online, so I'm gonna just say it, own up to it, be honest about it. But like, you immediately came in because we were supposed to be filming content. Like that's what we were doing in the hallway, and I was just like sobbing, and I was like, I don't know what to say. Like, let's just get this done, essentially. And you were like, how about you say this? And it was a funny joke about like my specific disability. I think you were like, just something about like the cost of arm and a leg or something.
I was like, you got to say that your healthcare costs an arm and a leg.
Yes, that was it. It was so off that you just like dropped it out of nowhere. I was like, oh. I love it. That's excellent. I've not seen that video. I don't know who has that footage, but
Natasha does. We'll both have to message her after this and get her to post it because I've been waiting for that one to come out. It's so good.
there's so many funny lines in it. I'm like, yes, we need to do that. But I think about that regularly because I was unwell in that scenario, and you helped me out in so many ways. Besides just like giving that great one-liner, but also we're just being very supportive as you are, and I'm grateful that you're a friend of mine in this space because this space can be really toxic sometimes. So
It can, and like and I've been there. So anytime I see a content creator struggling, I want to try to help because I also feel like as disability content creators, we get put in spaces where we kind of get put on the outside. Like sometimes it feels like we're only there because of our niche and not because they look at us as actual content creators. But then when we're in disability spaces, it's like, okay, well, people think we're just content creators. So we're in like a really unique space where anyone who does health content, anyone who does content about mental illness, disability, stuff like that, we're kind of on the outskirts of both spaces, and so it can feel really overwhelming. And you helped me in my that Chicago YouTube creator event was the first one I went to. You were that person for me there. I felt really out of place. I wasn't really talking to anyone yet. And it was like you and Natasha who gave me that safe space to feel comfortable, to feel like I belonged in that space. You and Natasha were also the first people who made me feel welcome in the disability space. I've said this forever because I don't have a visible disability. I've often felt like I don't belong in that space. And you guys were the first ones to really be like, well, is your schizophrenia disabling? And I was like, well, of course it is. I live with a severe. They're like, kind of sounds like a disability to me. And I was like, well, when you put it that way, it sounds really simple. And like, you guys were the first ones who kind of invited me into that space, especially as content creators, like we all kind of understand the stigma that we all deal with, and the frustration that comes along with our comment sections and our content. So and both of us, I think, in moments like that, have used humor to not only help ourselves but help each other. So I find myself doing that with a lot of people now, and really trying to make them feel included in those spaces where it's not quite what you would expect, and it can be really overwhelming and uncomfortable. And so I try really hard to make people feel calm and comfortable, and I do that through humor, which some people like. I have found that there are some people who are not ready for that yet, so I gotta play it safe. But
reason I think if people are not ready for that, I think that's more their problem than our problem.
I don't think they've healed enough. Some people just haven't healed enough to be in that place.
I like that. That's true. They've not healed enough. They've not used their brain enough, maybe either. It's fine. It's a bad year. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
Cynical little Jess over here. Anyway, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I have absolutely adored getting to know you over the last year. I don't want to like keep saying the same things over and over again, but I do want to like emphasize like you're totally right when you talk about like disability. We're either there as tokens, it feels like, or it's I never feel included at events like that we were just at. I never do. It's always like why are we here? Like it doesn't ever feel genuine, and I think that is always shown by the lack of accessibility at a lot of places, because I know that I've heard from a lot of our friends that were at that conference a lot of not great things. And like I had a great time, like overall, right? And I think most people would agree. And I understand that like efforts were put in, and I'm not trying to. That's why I'm not going to say what the conference was. But I do think that it's important to just say like there's still a lot of work to do, and that's why we still have jobs. So anyways.
Why we will probably our entire lives. There's always going to be more work that we need to do, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and that is such a shame. I would so happily give up everything if it meant.
I tell people that every day. I was like, I would be so happy to not have to make my content anymore or have to do, advocacy and stuff like that. But this is where we're at.
It's so funny because I've had so many conversations with my management team over the last like 6 months, just being like, you're hurting yourself by talking about all this stuff all the time. Like you could ease up, you could not be as vocal. And then something happens and I'm like, well, shit, I have to talk about it because this is so bad and it makes me mad. And I have no filter and I'm unable to not say the things when they're problems. That's where we're at. But it has been such a joy. I do have 4 hard-hitting questions for you that I ask all of my guests.
All right,
before
I'm
we
ready.
Jump off. Let's dive in. Question number 1. What is a song that you go to when you're feeling sad or unmotivated that will immediately raise your spirits a little bit?
Ooh, that is an amazing question. I really like I'm a classic rock guy, so I tend to gear towards like classic rock or like classic country. Not like new country, but old country. So for me, if I'm really in a mood where I need to just feel my feelings, "Hurt" by Johnny Cash. Just one of those that's like I'm going through something and I need to feel it because for so long in my life, being a dude from the Midwest, I was told don't be emotional, don't feel your feelings. That's one of those that I'm like, it's deep. It gives me enough time to like, think about whatever I'm going through and kind of deal with it, move on. And so that's an old classic country song I really like. Other than that, if I'm like trying to find motivation or be more upbeat, it's classic rock, and it doesn't matter the song. It's just got to be classic rock.
I love that. I grew up in a household where classic rock was on all the time, so I default to a lot of that as well. That's so great. And I'm going to have to look up this "Hurt" song by Johnny Cash, because I might not be a man from the Midwest, but I am a disabled woman, and I was told that feelings are weakness. Emotions are weakness.
I think the Midwest experience in general, I don't think it matters who you are. I think everyone's kind of told that, and it's just such incorrect information, but that's how we're raised,
It is, and I'm not blaming my family even for that, because I think it comes
That's
through
how they were
every...
raised, too.
Exactly. Okay, question number 2. When you are in a sad or upset mood, what is something that is in your rejection rescue kit? This could be an action, a thing, just something that pulls you out of your funk.
I love video games. I tried streaming on Twitch for a while, but I had to quit because video games are my safe space. I really like open world video games where I can either do missions or I can just bumble around and do literally nothing. I really think it's just an escape from reality. It gives me time to like be someone else and live a different life, and that to me is very healing, and I need that in my life. So as old as I get, I still go back to, I thought I'd grow out of it. I was like, 18, 19, 20. I'm like, I don't need video games. I'm 30 now and I play video games all the time. That's how I cope. That's how I relax. I love it.
Video games are great. I think that's a fantastic answer. And I also think it's important to have things that are not work related or
Yeah.
that are not like strategy based. Like, because I think even if it's like a side hustle, right? Like, it gets toxic at some point because then you're thinking about, oh, well, how do I do this? How do I make money? No. Everybody needs at least one hobby. I'm fully believing of this that is
Yep.
just for fun.
Exactly.
Okay. Question number 3. What is the last thing that you did scared?
Ooh, the last thing. The one that always comes to mind because I continue to do it, and you know how much I travel. I just started flying 3 years ago. I had never been on a plane until 3 years ago. I'm 30 years old. And so 3 years ago, I got on my very first plane and I was terrified. I am now on planes a few times a week sometimes, and I'm still very afraid of flying. I've definitely gotten better. I'm still like, I am able to sit through the plane without tensing up the entire time, but that's something where every time I get on it, I'm pretty proud of myself because it's something that I am very scared of, and it's something that I struggled with for the first full year of flying, and every time I do it, I look at it as an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment. Okay, first of all, flying is scary. I
Oh my
fully
God.
believe it's terrifying.
I don't know how more people. It's weird being on a plane with like 100 people, looking around, seeing people sleeping, seeing people just like totally relaxed. I'm like, guys, we're literally 40,000 feet up in the air. Does this not concern anyone?
Every time I do an international flight, which is less these days, which is so nice. But I would wake up in the middle of the night and we'd be over the ocean and I'd have like a panic because I'd be like,
yeah.
oh my God, we're over the
Oh my
ocean.
God, we're up in the air.
Whoa, we could just like fall. Like, what is actually keeping us up? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I didn't study
I think
that.
that's scarier when you're not a scientist because you literally don't know. I'm just trusting that everything's working. It's like I have no idea how this works or why I'm in the air right now.
It's so scary. It's so scary. I love that you said that. Also, I have to bring this up because you travel all the time. And when we were in DC recently, you talked me through your airport outfit, and I think it's iconic. It's so amazing. Can you share what your airport outfit is?
Well, part of always being freaked out to be on a plane means I had to figure out how to get comfortable on a plane. And so, like, I don't care if I'm leaving the White House. Before I get on a plane, I am dressing into my comfy clothes because I always wear ankle socks, Crocs, and I have a specific set of Crocs just for the airport. They have little planes on them. Uh, so I have my airport Crocs, and then I have Comfort, which is a brand of like sweatpants. I have Comfort sweatpants, and then a very soft. It's a Hugo Boss T-shirt, but it's like really soft. It's like that satiny fabric, and then my Carhartt beanie. And it doesn't matter how many times a year I'm on a plane, where I'm going, what I'm doing immediately when I get off, I will be in that outfit every single time because I need to be comfortable. I need to have something familiar. And yeah, if you ever see me at the airport, that is 100% what I'll be wearing every single time.
I love it. I love it so much. Everything down to the Crocs. I too have. I have 2 airport uniforms. I call them. It depends on if I'm in my prosthetic or not in my prosthetic. Prosthetic. It's this like. I have 2 of them. I bought 2 in 2 different colors. This dress, which sounds formal. It's not. It's like just like a cotton dress. It's so simple and it's like kind of baggy, but I can get the leg on and off easily, and that's the important thing. And then if I'm not in my prosthetic, it's like this sweatsuit that I have. It's bright red, and I feel like because it's red, I'm like, I look fabulous, but I don't. I just look like a red marshmallow, and it's great.
Comfort over dressy every day at the airport, though. Like some people dress up way too much to go to the airport.
If you have makeup on, if you've done your hair, if you've done anything to look nice for the airport, I'm questioning who you are. And
Questioning your sanity, and that's coming from a schizophrenic person.
I'm going to tailor this question, the final question for you. I always ask all my guests, what is a final piece of advice that you would give to the listener today based on our conversation? And I feel like it's a perfect time because I'm sure a lot of these things are already in your mind. So what is on your mind today?
I think for me, I want to continue to remind people that they're not alone. And that's not just in the mental health space. That's not just in the mental illness space. I think part of what you do that's really amazing is you help people in your space recognize that, they can live fulfilling, amazing lives. And I think that's really what I want to portray. That's why I work with content creators who also do that. It's so easy, especially if you did grow up in a small town like me or Jessica, to feel like you're alone in your journey and no one could understand what you're going through. And that is the most destructive feeling. That is the worst feeling you could ever have. And so I want anyone listening to recognize that no matter it is what you're struggling with, there are people who can not only relate, but who want to help you, who want to see you succeed, who want to see you thrive. And so my quest for everyone is to go out and find those people, because they are there. And unfortunately, you're not going to find them at home. You're not going to find them in your small town. If you have to find them online, great. If you have to find them in peer support groups, great. Just go out, find your people, and it'll make life not only easier, it'll make life a lot more worth living.
Kody, that is a beautiful sentiment to end this episode on. I feel like it ties everything that we've said into a nice little bow too. So thank you so much for your time today. Where can everybody find you and follow you?
I am on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram as Schizophrenic Hippie. I'm also on Facebook, and you can also find my website, which is kodygreen.com.
Amazing. Well, everything will be linked in the show notes below, friends. But everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Access Denied. Kody, once again, you've been an absolute joy to have here. It's always fun connecting with you. So thank you so much for coming on. And y'all, I will see you next week. Bye. And that concludes another episode of Access Denied. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like this week's episode, be sure to hit that subscription button and notification bell here on YouTube, or go check us out on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss another episode. We have so much exciting content coming out for season 2. You're not going to want to miss it. I'd like to give a huge shout out to JP Warner Sound for dropping this sick beat that you're listening to right now. And finally, if you'd like to rep your love of Access Denied, you now can with our very exciting merch line, featuring a very special Access Denied mug so that you can sip your morning tea while you listen to me spill the accessibility. Anyways, friends, thank you so much once again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye!